Hey everyone, welcome to another podcast of the Downfield Read, where we are going to take a very in-depth look at your Week 2 matchups in the NFL. We'll go through some predictions. Might even get into some fantasy, some stat lines, all that fun stuff. But first and foremost, I do want to introduce one individual. He is new to the show. His name is Nick, and he is the host of something called Relatively Uncharted. We happen to meet via the fantasy turf wars that I keep talking about every time that I've got a podcast. Luckily for the both of us, we are in different divisions. He is in Division 3. I am in Division 4. We've had our first fantasy week in the books already. I ended up losing. My team underperformed, like I'm sure a lot of other teams underperformed. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce Nick. And I don't want to leave out this guy here. Jason's going to be with us today as well. There aren't too many Friday the 13th in there, and he really wanted to be a part of the show. So, but Nick, go ahead, take it away and let us know who you are and what Relatively Uncharted is and how you're doing in Fantasy Turf War so far this year.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be on here. It's nice that Jason decided to join. He kind of just shows up out of nowhere. You don't really have a choice, but with Friday the 13th, maybe we had a little suspicion he'd join us, but. Yeah, so appreciate that intro. I do run a podcast channel. It's called Relatively Uncharted. So the premise of it essentially is about careers. The name came from, I run the show with my cousin Ryan, who's also in our league. We did not have the fortune of being in separate divisions. So lucky for him, he had a big week. He's actually at the top of our division. Unlucky for me, I took a big L. But yeah, we just we found this fantasy turf war thing, and he actually has a separate podcast that he does as well. It's called Saturdays in the Swamp. But yeah, we just kind of started podcasting, and had the idea. We're cousins, we're related, but talking about careers, we both have an interest in finding other things, kind of finding a path in life. I know personally for myself, landing in my career, it took some time to get my feet on the ground and enjoy it, what I'm doing. So I figured, why not dig into other people's careers and how they got there? Because basically everyone's path is different. So, if we can take some stories from those who have been there, done that, still forging it, can they share something with those that are interested in a career related to what our guests are doing? So we've had some fun guests on there so far. It started off with friends and family, and, it's always entertaining and fun to, connect and hear their stories, learn a little bit. We had another one of our cousins on there, and he told us some stories. So he's actually older than Ryan and myself. So he told us stuff about family before we were even born that we didn't know. So that was kind of neat. And then, yeah, we've started venturing off and finding some new unique guests that we had never met, spoken with, just kind of reached out and said, hey, you interested? We like what you're doing. I think you have an interesting story to tell. We'd love to share with our audience. And wildly enough, some really amazing guests said yes. And, I think it's kind of testament to the whole point. It's like, get out there, do it. You never know. What's the worst they can do is say no. So, you and I were chit chatting here a little bit before the show went live. We're just kind of having fun with it. And that's really what it is. And, what's more fun than fantasy football, talking sports? If you like sports and football, joining this fantasy turf war league, you might enjoy it. So week 2, ready for it.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I'll plug Fantasy Turf Wars. I have no affiliation with them outside of playing, but I will say that the guy who kind of heads the whole thing up, Corey, he basically came out earlier today with a video to recap week 1 matchups, week 2 matchups, and basically said that we are about 20 people away from a big giveaway. And the giveaway is an autographed San Francisco 49ers helmet autographed by Christian McCaffrey. So if you go onto his YouTube channel, Fantasy Turf Wars, and like it and subscribe, once we get to 100 people, he's going to do that giveaway. So you've got like a 1% chance, maybe a little bit less than 1%. But yeah, if you want a Christian McCaffrey helmet, hell yeah, man. I'm not a San Francisco fan by any means, but I'll definitely take that and put it in my memorabilia stuff. So one of the things Nick had mentioned was his cousin, and his nickname is Gilly, I guess, Saturdays in the Swamp. And he was actually on one of my first shows. We tried to reach out to him. He was busy tonight. Love to have him back on the show as well. But what do you say we get rolling on this? I think that's why everybody's tuning in. see what the predictions are for this week and see who we've got winners and losers. How about that?
Let's do it.
All right, beautiful. Let's get this pulled up. We've got Thursday night, week 2, we've got Buffalo at Miami. And here's a fun fact for everybody. It just came across my phone as well, is that Devon Achane, if you've got him, he is playing tonight. He went from questionable to healthy, so he will be playing. At what capacity? Not really sure, but I'm sure Jeff Wilson, if you picked him up on the waivers as a backup for tonight's plan, he might get some touches as well. They're probably going to end up splitting time. But we're looking at a damn good, kudos to the NFL schedulers. Kudos for this game. Thursday night, Buffalo and Miami both 1-0 in the same division, obviously, in the AFC East. And I got to tell you, from what I saw last week, Josh Allen, that was kind of an MVP type of performance for me when I saw him coming back. They started off real slow, but give him some credit. It's week 1. 2 passing touchdowns. He threw for 237 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. He ran for about 40 yards. They started slow, and it was against Arizona, a team that they probably should have came out and just started beating up on right away. And they were at home. And at one point, they were down 17-3 late in the second quarter. Got to tell you, if they do that again tonight against Miami, probably not going to be winning that game. It was a sloppy first half by both teams, but a great second half by Buffalo as a whole. Did you happen to catch much of that game, Nick?
Yeah, so I was actually I didn't watch that game live, but I was following along. I'm in a group chat where I've got a diehard Buffalo Bills fan friend, and so he loves to update us when Josh Allen does something big.
Of course.
So it was very quiet early on, but so when you mentioned Hall of Fame performance from Josh Allen, I was curious where you're taking that because like you said, Arizona probably wasn't the toughest competitor for them to go against. They definitely struggled late, but the one thing that I always recognize is Bills are a second half team, and they tend to turn it up. Super Bowl contenders figure that out. That's what they do. Is they go in the first half, they've got their plan, and then they pivot. They come up with a strategy for the second half, and sure enough, they did it. And I agree with your point. If they perform like they did against Arizona, a little sluggish in the beginning, even if they do turn it up in the second half, I think Miami's a team that won't let you close the gap enough to take the win there. So
yeah, exactly. With them, it's definitely not a sprint, even though they've got some of the fastest players in the NFL on their team with Hill and Achane and Waddle. But the funny thing is, with Miami last week, so they won as well. They started off real slow as well last week. So Tua didn't look sharp as far as I was concerned. There was a lot of dump off passes that he was getting his completion percentage rating up there, a lot of dump off passes. But this team is so fast with the guys that they've got. I mean, you could dump it off behind the line of scrimmage and they're just bolting past everyone. They were also down. They were down 14-0 late in that second quarter. But they were also able to turn it around against Jacksonville. Basically what I saw in that game is that it really came down to the defense. Jacksonville did all their scoring in the first half against Miami. They got off to a fast start and they still lost. So really, I think what this game for me is going to come down to the defense and who can get the bigger lead first. And I think both of these teams have the capability of doing that. I think it's just a matter of who's going to jump out on top of the other one first.
Absolutely. Could have said it better. And that last minute, upgrade for Achane, I know a lot of managers were probably excited about that. So he went early on in our draft. We were Division III, went early on. I'm sure he went early on in a lot of drafts. I kind of remember thinking, beware, you don't pick him too soon. And, sure enough, where I landed in the draft, he didn't land in my roster, but, he certainly showed up. He's going to do something again tonight, if he's playing all the snaps, but, good for him.
Yeah, kudos for him. And I actually had a chance to get Achane going back and looking at my draft. I had the number 5 pick overall, and in a 16-man league, that means, we're coming back and it's a snake draft. So I had number 5 overall and then number 12 in the next round, and Achane was there. And I thought, I can't take 2 running backs back to back because I ended up picking up Bijan with my first pick at number 5. Ended up going with Debo. And that was also a good pick because he had a really stellar game last week as well. But not to get too much into fantasy, who do you got in this game? Who are you liking?
I'd really love to devastate my buddy. So I'm going to pick Miami here.
Oh, Miami. You know what? I can't blame you on that. The spread on this game is Miami by 2.5, and I think it really is going to be that close. I give the nod, a very slim nod, to Miami as well. I think that they will end up pulling this game out only because it's at home. Now, obviously, these guys are in the same division. They're going to play each other again. Maybe when they go back to Buffalo, if they're both playing the same kind of football at that point in time, you give the nod to the home team. But again, spread 2.5, which means even the odd makers are thinking this is going to be a really close game. Should be a fun one for tonight.
For sure.
All right, so that's tonight's game, and we got maybe an hour before that starts. So we're going to get through the other 15 games for this weekend, and let's start Sunday afternoon. San Francisco at Minnesota. I don't know if you know this or not. I'm actually from Minnesota. I'm not a Vikings fan, though, as you can tell. Ravens stuff in the background.
I did pick that up.
The 49ers had a really convincing win early over the New York Jets this week. And I do want to emphasize that earlier this week, because that just happened 4 days ago. Obviously, that was on Monday Night Football. So they've got a very quick turnaround time. Schedule makers did not like them at all to schedule them for a Monday game and then the following Thursday. But they got a short turnaround time. They have to travel to Minnesota. Honestly, though, San Fran is the best-looking team on paper, and from what I saw of all the games on the field as well, even without Christian McCaffrey. They've got Jordan Mason in the backfield, and he might as well have been Christian McCaffrey. He had 28 rushing attempts, 147 yards and a touchdown. He was their absolute workhorse in that game. And then I thought that they used Debo all over the field. He seemed to be all over. They were doing jet sweeps, and he was short passes, long passes. San Fran started my power ranking number 1 this year. Sorry, Kansas City. I'm not buying it. San Fran looks better on paper. What are you thinking about that, Nick?
Yeah, so I would certainly rank them up there. It's kind of hard to put them over top the Super Bowl champions that did beat them the year before. But I was pretty high on them, on the 49ers. Now, I will say, Mason did a good job coming in last minute scratch with McCaffrey. But I will say the star of the game happened to be the San Francisco kicker. I mean, what was it, 4 or 5 field goals? It was unbelievable. I had Kittle. I was waiting for a touchdown from Kittle, and I'd say that'll contribute to why I lost. But I'm high on the 49ers. I'm not a 49ers fan myself. I'm actually a Rams fan, so it's a little bitter to say that, but I've got them over Minnesota here.
Sure, yeah. And I tell you what, Minnesota didn't look bad last week either. I don't think that they're a real bad team, but they did play a bad team last week at the New York Giants. They ended up winning 28-6. The defense really showed up. Defense had 5 sacks, 2 interceptions, but again, it's against the New York Giants and Daniel Jones. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. I thought Darnold looked really efficient, and he actually completed his first 12 passes. Outside, there was a defensive pass interference, so we're going to scratch that one. But he completed his first 12 passes. So it's going to be closer than what I think people think it's going to be. San Fran right now has the nod. It's a 5-point spread for them. But here's a fun fact for you. Both teams are obviously 1-0 at this point. San Fran has not won in Minnesota since 1992.
So, I mean, that's not something to be taken lightly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if Minnesota would have come out and, crap the bed last week, everybody would have been pouncing on, Minnesota or on San Fran to take control of it. But the way that they played, Aaron Jones looks like he loves his new home coming over from Green Bay to Minnesota. Obviously, they've got Jefferson, but the defense looked much improved from last year as well. So I think it's going to be close, maybe closer than the 5. I'm not going to give you any betting advice. I don't want to have anybody lose money, but I've still got San Fran in this one. I can't deny that they're probably going to win. Minnesota comes into the season at somewhere between that maybe 15 to 20 ranking for the beginning of the season anyway.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, like you said, Aaron Jones fits right in up there. He's, not too far for him to travel from Green Bay over to Minnesota, Minneapolis there, but I was happy with that transition there for them.
Yeah, he looked fresh. So we've got Minnesota. On to the next game, or I assume that you've got Minnesota as well, Nick.
I'm sorry, San Fran, right?
Or I'm sorry, San Fran. Sorry,
yeah.
I've got San Fran. I assume that you've got San Fran.
That I would agree with that as well.
Awesome. On to the next one. So now we've got Seattle at New England, and this one is kind of an anomaly of a game. New England 1-0 beating Cincinnati, and we'll get into that game in just a little bit. But Seattle won last week versus Denver, and they won 26-20, although that score is a lot closer than what the actual game was. Seattle's got one of the most balanced teams that I saw last week, not just in offense and defense, but also run versus the pass. Now, Geno was good. He was good. He started off a little sloppy, but as a veteran, he came back and he bounced back. Kenneth Walker was very efficient, 20 rushing attempts for 103 yards and a touchdown. And the defense really kept the pressure on Bo Nix all game. 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery. Seattle had this game won by the end of the third quarter. Like I said, with Denver, they tacked on a late touchdown. It really didn't mean much. Can't really expect much more or much different from Mike McDonald in Seattle being the defensive coordinator for Baltimore last year and having a top defense.
Yeah, that kind of plays into it. You expect that. And, like you said, Kenneth Walker did pretty well. So I'm high on that team right now.
And that Legion of Boom might be, that nickname might be creeping their way back in if they keep on performing like that.
Yeah. 12th man's going to make an appearance again. We'll see. Yeah,
and how scary is that for you being a Rams fan, that you don't get to count out Seattle this year?
Rams still find a way to do it.
They do.
Last year I was glad we made it. And week 1 was I guess we could talk about it later when we get to these teams, but week 1, a playoff matchup, it was very reminiscent of last year. But I was impressed with how far they got. Took a little bit of falls to get there, but I don't really account for Seattle in this season to be to shut down the Rams or anything like that. So
when I tell you what, I was a Ravens fan too. There were games last year. We blew out Miami. We blew out San Francisco. We blew out Detroit. The Rams kept it close. I think we ended up going to overtime with the Rams. So they're a very scary team. I'd watch out for them, but we'll get to the Rams. Yep. New England, on the other hand, got a very interesting win. And I think that's putting it lightly over Cincinnati, who honestly, they looked awful. They came out and they're all orange from top to bottom. And I swear they might as well have just come out in rust-colored jerseys because that's how it looked like they played. New England, the big factor in that game is that New England surprisingly, very, very, very surprisingly controlled the trenches, the time of possession. They controlled the ball with Ramondre Stevenson, 25 attempts, 120 yards, and a touchdown. And Cincy could not bring him down. It's very interesting to look at this New England team and say, hey, you know what? The only reason why they're putting in Jacoby Brissett is because that offense looked so bad during the preseason that they didn't want to get Drake May killed. So now you've got Seattle and New England. I don't think Seattle's going to have the same kind of problem tackling. They sure as heck didn't show it last week. But what is your take on the New England win over Cincy last week?
Yeah, I would say I was shocked with how well New England performed. But as of late, I'm not very shocked how Cincinnati's been performing. Burrows was irrelevant last year, and again this year. Hopefully we don't see the same thing, but it's kind of was a bust for them.
Yeah, and I will say this: the line on that game is Seattle by 3.5. And I got to tell you, I would go more than that. I might even put a bet down on that one. I'm going Seattle over New England in New England. And I'm going big time. I'm thinking 7 to 10 points at least for Seattle.
I could agree with that. I'd go maybe more points.
Yeah? It wouldn't surprise me if they ended up beating them like 28-6, honestly.
Yeah. Shutting them down completely, after last week, I'd say they get some points on the board, but definitely a larger margin. I would give it to Seattle on that.
Awesome. All right, let's get on to the next one here. We got a couple of 0-1 teams from the NFC East. New York Giants, we just talked about earlier, who got shellacked by the Vikings at home by a score of 28-6. Their revamped offensive line gave up 5 sacks. Daniel Jones was terrible. Let's not mince any words there. He was 22 of 42, completing 52% of his passes, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, including 1 pick six that happened within about 2.5 seconds. Andrew Van Ginkel just got it, and he was in the end zone. He was getting hit all game long, and he could not sustain a drive. Singletary is not Saquon, obviously. But they really proved that. And this looks like a dink and dunk offense at best. I saw no explosiveness from this offense at all. It's not a shock to me, really, by how bad the New York Giants team is, especially when you got the GM in the offseason on Hard Knocks saying, we could have Patrick Mahomes back here and we still wouldn't win any games. So what is your take on the Giants?
Yeah, it's a little rough when your GM's saying that, but very not high on the Giants. It's been very rough for years. I'm actually in New York myself, so I could just see the pain in all of my neighbors' faces. Fortunately, the Jets are also pretty atrocious, but Daniel Jones is nothing. Saquon's gone. They don't have a lot going for them. I was actually looking, is Darius Slayton still on the team?
Darius Slayton is on the team, yeah.
Yeah, so he was irrelevant, right?
He was, well, I think most of the wide receivers were irrelevant outside of Malik Neighbors. I think he only had maybe 5 or 6 catches. I don't have his stat line in front of me, but he didn't even do that well.
Yeah. So and to get them going, you have to have a strong quarterback behind the snap, and they're lacking that. They really don't have it.
That's a tough move when they decided to franchise tag Saquon Barkley in the beginning of last year and then give Daniel Jones the contract. I thought that they were going to go the other way around and make it a prove-it year for Daniel Jones. That's what I would have done anyway. So I get to pat myself on the back and go, dude, you were right again. But yeah, it's turning out to be a real bad decision on the Giants. On the other side of the ball, you've got Washington. They got Jaden Daniels. And I got to tell you, he likes to run to the tune of 16 rushes for 88 yards. He had 2 touchdowns. He also had 17 to 24 completions for 184 yards. Brian Robinson looked like an afterthought, and honestly, so did Terry McLaurin. McLaurin had maybe 2 catches for 20 yards, something like that. This is the Jaden Daniels show, and their defense was maybe the worst defense that I saw all weekend. They gave up 37 points, 4 passing touchdowns to Tampa Bay. And they also missed 2 field goals in that game. So now they got to fire York and find themselves a new kicker. But this team overall, if it wasn't for Jaden Daniels, what a freaking mess this team would be.
Absolutely. To make the Buccaneers look that good right now?
Yeah, and coming into it, it's like you're looking at Baker Mayfield. And what was he ranked? Maybe quarterback 21, 22, something like that. They made him look like quarterback number 1, number 2. With how well he did last year. This game might be the ugliest game of the entire week. Washington is projected to win by 2. So instead of this one being kind of a blowout like Buffalo and Miami, where it's like, oh man, who's going to have the ball last at the end? I think this one is going to be who's not going to make that final mistake at the end.
Yeah, that's actually, that's funny. I mean, you couldn't put it better because, who's going to fumble at the end? Who's going to throw an interception that just kind of ends it and just kind of stumble into the end zone? That's
exactly
kind of what it looks like right here. A little bad news Bears.
Yeah. So who are you going with in this one?
The fans. They're gonna stay home and enjoy. But no. Yeah, I'll give you the Jaden Daniels show.
Jaden Daniels show. I've got Washington as well. I don't think it's going to be a pretty game. I think it is going to be a close game just because they're both equally bad. But yeah, I'm thinking Washington might just break away with that one at the end.
Yeah.
All right, next game. Here's a fun one. How about the Chargers at the Carolina Panthers? And the Chargers won last week by a score of 22-10 over the Las Vegas Raiders. Herbert looked okay, but it was J.K. Dobbins. It was the J.K. Dobbins show, and I think that's what they're going to turn around to be, especially with Jim Harbaugh back there being the coach. And if you watch this game, Joe Alt, their first-round draft pick, best tackle in the draft, was phenomenal against Max Crosby. I mean, he shut Max Crosby down. So if that gives you any idea of what this offensive line is going to be like, it's pretty damn good. Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, at one point in time, they had back-to-back sacks. This team, again, fundamentally very sound. They won in the trenches. They had 2 forced fumbles and fumble recoveries, 1 pick. Jim Harbaugh is back. What are your thoughts on the other LA team?
Yeah, I'll say that's a kind of a must-win for Harbaugh, especially after leaving the Wolverines and taking the jump back up to the NFL. and then just the controversy with how it ended. But they showed up, they won, and like I said, it was a must win for them, and they pulled it through.
Yeah, and Harbaugh, I don't know what his record is. I wish I would have looked this up beforehand, but Harbaugh has an amazing open weekend win record too. So you just kind of felt
really?
like,
okay.
Yeah, you just kind of got the impression that this was going to take place. On the other side, you got Carolina. They lost 47-10. Wow, I couldn't even say that with a straight face. I'm sorry. They lost 47-10 to New Orleans. They made New Orleans look like a Super Bowl team. It was 30-3 at halftime. So this game was over. I'm sure it was in New Orleans, so maybe nobody was leaving. If it was in Carolina, nobody would have been left in the stands. Bryce Young, I've said it at least a dozen times. He is not the guy. 4 sacks, 2 picks, completed 43% of his passes. The defense had nothing. They were maybe above average at best, but man, you're making New Orleans look that good. And Bryce Young is still, if he was a rookie this year, it might be seen as a little unacceptable. He's got a whole year under his belt here. And now it just becomes time of, if this continues, at what point in time do they pull the guy?
Much sooner than later.
Yeah.
I don't have anything good to say about Carolina. I'm still bitter about that game. New Orleans went off, and none of the players that I had for them, I picked Olave very early in my draft and got nothing from him. Very disappointed. And the Panthers have had nobody relevant since McCaffrey, since Cam Newton, since third leg Greg. Like, they just have nothing for me to be impressed by. And, this is going to be a very one-sided game again for the Chargers.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. New Orleans did it without Olave. He did basically nothing this game, and they still managed to crush.
Yeah. It was atrocious, but yeah.
This has the makings of being the most cringy game of the weekend, where you're going to tune in and you're going to see that it's something similar to last week, where it's 24-0 in the second quarter. It's just not going to end up being well. The spread on the game is the Chargers by 6. I would take the Chargers by a lot more. I am going with LA.
Yeah, at least 6.
At least 6. If they can't win by more than 6, now you got to start to question it, don't you? It's like, wait a minute. You only beat them by 3 or 4. What the hell is that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly thinking about picking up some Chargers players off the bench right now, just to see if they put them in late in the game. Maybe I'll pick up some points from them. Yeah,
I've been trying to trade for Gus the Bus since he did not have that great of a game, but nobody's willing to give him up. So
you keep him. Yeah, you keep him in your back pocket.
Oh yeah. All right, next game we got a couple of 1-1 teams. We just mentioned the New Orleans Saints, who destroyed Carolina last week, and then we've got Dallas, who I thought was supposed to be bad. That's what all the big talking heads are saying. Dallas is not going to be good this year. Well, how about this? They went into Cleveland and royally disrupted their defense. But New Orleans, again, 47-10. They put up the most points last week than any other team, and they can score. I said this earlier in the year. I'm a Derek Carr fan. I'm waiting for this guy to actually be consistently good. He was legit. 82.5% completion rating, 3 touchdowns. That was without Olave, who, there's my stat, 2 receptions for 11 yards. Kamara's a stud, and man, did he look quick. His spin moves, his jukes, man, he just looked really sharp. The defense had 4 sacks. Alante Taylor, who's their nickelback, had 3 by themselves. They came out looking really, really ready out of most of the other teams that we talked about. Maybe it's Carolina being really, really bad. But New Orleans came out, they had their foot on the gas pedal the whole time and never took it off.
Yeah, I think they can control this game for sure. Dallas was definitely a surprise, but after a big contract for Dak, then maybe he was like, all right, now I could start actually playing. You kind of hope, as a Dallas fan, you hope that was much sooner where they, got it together. But Zeke is back. You got Ferguson as a good tight end. Dallas somehow was relevant. And last year, I was honestly impressed with how great of a start they had, and then not so surprised that they fell off towards the end. It just kind of always seems to happen lately with Dak and the Cowboys. But like you said, as soon as New Orleans puts their foot on the gas, they're going to control the game, and they're just going to run it down the field. the whole game. So I got New Orleans on this.
Okay. Yeah, Dallas overall, I mean, like I said, they went to Cleveland. They put a beat down on the best defense in 2023. They put up 33 points. Dak was good. Statistically, he wasn't that great. He managed the game. He was good. Ezekiel Elliott was good. Lamb was good. He looked fresh, probably from his holdout. But the Dallas defense was huge. 6 sacks, which came in probably the most timely situations. It always seemed to be like on a third down, third and long. They need the first down, whatever it is. But also 2 interceptions. They had a punt return for a touchdown to go up 27-3 early in the third quarter. The final of that game was 33-17. Dallas, I don't doubt, will put up double-digit wins again this year because they are just a sound game. But to your point, I think they make the playoffs and they probably lose in the first round again.
It's inevitable. It's just how it goes.
I think this is going to be a really exciting game too, because I think there's still some question marks, as well as both of these teams played this last weekend. I think there's some question marks of the reality of the situation. Are they which team is really that good? Is there an imposter team in here? Dallas is currently picked by 6 is the spread. And I got to tell you, I know you said the Saints, man, but I got to go Dallas because it's at home. I hope I'm wrong on this one, though. I really do. I really want the Saints to be good.
Yeah, stick, like you said before, stick with your opinion, run with it. No hard feelings there. I expect very little from Dallas, just from how they've played since I've been an NFL fan, and I think the Saints just have such a large offensive arsenal to utilize. So if Dallas starts stopping them, if the defense does what they did last week, you might be right, but I definitely still will hold Saints on that.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on a little bit too. Obviously, they upgraded the offensive line this year with J.C. Statham, and then they got Penning on the other side, Trevor Penning, because they lost Ramczyk earlier before the season even started. Hopefully, they can keep that offensive line intact, because if they lose too many more people, it might be an ugly situation for New Orleans again. But I think this is going to be a very exciting game. Moving on to the next one, we can agree
on that.
Yeah, we got a couple of 0-1 teams. We got Indianapolis at Green Bay, and this one is going to be interesting as well. And I will just preface this whole thing. Green Bay should win, ... but who knows what will happen here. Indy lost 27-29 at home to Houston, but that game wasn't even really that close. Richardson is going to be a problem, and I don't mean for Green Bay. I mean for Indianapolis. Watching him play, he takes off way too quick before going through his progressions. I can't imagine he's getting through half of his progressions before he's tuck-tailing and running. I think he's going to get himself hurt like he did last year, honestly. The only reason why the Colts were in the game, the defense, special teams for Indy, they were really good. And what I saw between Indy and Houston, we'll get into them because we haven't talked about them yet. They're very methodical. They're very good. Indianapolis, not to use a baseball term, is going to live and die by the big play. They're going to live and die by the home run. It was on offense. It was either a strikeout or it was a home run. And that's how they played that game.
Yeah. I mean, the only highlight I saw was that toss by Richardson on his back foot. And, that was the big play.
Yeah. It was a 60-yard play, and you're not going to keep on getting those. And he had a couple of those big passes. You're not going to get those against teams later on in the season when they've kind of brushed the rust off a little bit.
Yeah, I'd agree. Richardson, he's still young. He's still, he has to make some strides to get better, get comfortable in what he's doing, stay in the pocket. If he gets injured, then it'll be another repeat like last season, and they're still just not a strong team. That was a impressive performance. I was actually surprised by that, but yeah, it's a rookie team there.
Yeah, kind of mediocre stats for the receiving crew, kind of mediocre for Taylor running the ball. Let me ask you this real quick, because I'm a big Joe Flacco fan for obvious reasons. Do you think this offense is built more for a guy like Richardson who takes off and runs the ball, or do you think it's built more for a pocket passing quarterback?
I'm going to have to play ignorant there for lack of knowledge. Yeah.
Sure. No, that's fine.
I'm not one of those who can break down a team, but I mean, I guess we'll tell, right? Ask me that question at the end of the year. Now that you've put me on the radar for that, I'm actually
Yeah.
going to start paying attention and see, really what the difference is for them.
Very cool. All right, let's get Green Bay. I thought they looked good last week. They looked a lot better than the turf that they were playing on versus Philadelphia. They lost that game 29-34, but that was actually a close game. And I will say that was with Jordan Love. Now it's Malik Willis, who's already showed what he can't do in Tennessee over the last 2 years. I don't think he has any credibility in the passing game. And Green Bay, if they are going to win this game, they are literally going to have to be carried by Josh Jacobs and Emmanuel Wilson. They're going to have to do all the work because I don't think anybody in the NFL thinks that Malik Willis is a decent quarterback or even a decent backup for this matter. I would put him, before the season even started, somewhere between 50 and 60th best quarterback in the league.
Yeah, that's some serious shade, but I don't think you're far off. He's certainly not a young gun like, Richardson can have flashes of success, and Malik Willis doesn't have that. So, I like that preface that this may and most likely will be without Jordan Love. I did see he's still doubtful, so I doubt that he's going to get the start. But it's kind of makes this one a toss-up for me. I really, really can't pick one way or the other. But that was kind of neat to see the first game in what was it, Sao Paulo, Brazil?
In Brazil, yeah.
Yeah, that turf certainly messed things up for them. But Josh Jacobs was able to get his feet under him and get downfield a few times. So who knows if they can, punch the ball through, then I got Green Bay on that. So
okay, yeah, I think I think that's going to be a tough game. Me and you are going to disagree on this one again. I've got Indianapolis just because I don't think that they're going to be able to stop the big plays from happening. They're not going to be able to put up enough points to counter the big plays from happening. And I'm a little shocked, actually, because Jordan Love did sprain his MCL. This is not an insignificant injury. For them to put him as doubtful, I was actually expecting to see him on the IR for at least 4 games. Because you can't just go out. This is going to take at least 4 to 6 weeks to heal, depending on the severity of the sprain. So I'm shocked that Green Bay didn't go out and actually try to get a decent quarterback. Tannehill is still out there. There's some other guys that can play. But I think this is going to be a rude awakening. I think they're almost just like, in that competition that I find is very weird when 2 people line up across from each other and see how hard the other one can smack each other in the face.
Yeah.
I don't know what you call that. But
was it the Oklahoma drill or something like that?
Yeah, but it's literally – I feel like the GM of the Packers is like, go ahead. Let's see how hard you can hit me. Maybe I'm not conscious after this. I don't know. Let's find out.
Yeah. The competitors always feel a little bit tougher before the slap than afterwards.
Oh, yeah. All right, let's go to another 0-1 matchup here between the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, we talked about Cleveland. They lost to Dallas 17-33. Deshaun Watson, his demeanor watching this game, I got to tell you, and I'm not a big Deshaun Watson fan anyway, but watching him play, it's like he could care less about being on that football field, and maybe he would like to be anywhere else, maybe at a massage table, something like that, anywhere else but playing football. He looked tired. He looked deflated. He looked dejected. He looked like he didn't have a care in the world, and he was also really, really bad. He had a 53% completion rating. He only threw for 169 yards, 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown. He could not find targets. I'm watching him scrambling around. I'm wondering what he's looking at or what he's not seeing. But he just did not look good at all. And you got to wonder, after 3 years of being in Cleveland now, at what point in time are you going to pull the plug on this guy? Because, you're giving him all the guaranteed money, but this is just that's a bad look. The Cleveland D, they started off a little strong in the first, but then they fizzled out. They came back maybe toward the end of the third, but it was too late by that point because Dallas really had caught up by that point in time. So the defense couldn't even save, unfortunately, the offense. And obviously they don't have Nick Chubb. They got Jerome Ford back there. I think defenses are going to tee off on Cleveland this year.
Yeah. You kind of said it too, is, Deshaun, he's got this guaranteed money. Does that play a part in the effort that he puts forth in the game? He's not without controversy. I think he's in the news again for another issue. Yeah. There may have been a massage table involved. Who knows? but it's he's reminiscent of Vince Young. I was a big Vince Young fan
Yeah.
way back in the day. He's had an excellent college career, coming off the high of that, and then just cannot get his mental space right for the NFL, and ends up burning out. And the Browns, like you said, at what point do you cut him? They got rid of Johnny pretty fast. They got rid of Baker Mayfield pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So why is he still lingering around? At some point, you got to rip the Band-Aid and move on.
Yeah, you do. I like that. On the other side of the ball, they're at Jacksonville, and Jacksonville looked good early against Miami. They were out to a 14-0 lead midway through that second quarter. A combo of not scoring in the second half, which is always going to get you beat, and not being able to tackle led to the eventual demise of Jacksonville losing on a last-second field goal, 20-17, as time expired. Their third down efficiency wasn't bad. It was the costly turnovers and the mistakes late in the game. Otherwise, I think ETN had fumbled the ball maybe on the 1 yard line. And you give it right back to Miami. And I think they scored on the very next play because the ball went in the end zone. Miami had it on like the 20-25. And then they just shot deep. And it was a 14-point swing within maybe a minute and a half.
Yeah. And so I kind of like this matchup here. Trevor Lawrence versus Deshaun Watson, back-to-back Clemson, national title quarterbacks for them. So
Yeah.
I think this could be the moment that shows Deshaun or even the rest of the world, if Trevor Lawrence pulls out the win here, it's kind of like he probably always should have had the nod to begin with. But yeah, Jacksonville, they've never really been a great team, in my opinion. They've had some star players. They've had some solid players. That game against Miami was actually a good performance. So
I thought so, yeah.
Yeah. So I've got Trevor Lawrence and the Jags on this, and I'm going to stick with that.
Yeah. Jacksonville, the spread is 3. I would agree with that. I'm taking Jacksonville as well. I think that they just have a little bit more to them. They have a little bit more talent on their team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. If they can figure out how to convert on a third down and really not take their foot off the pedal. Like I said, they were off running, and maybe it even surprised them. But man, you're going up against Miami. I don't care who you are. If you're not up by 28 points, you got to keep nailing away at them.
Yep.
Otherwise, they'll bite you. So, yep, I got Jacksonville on that one too. Good call. Let's move on to yet another battle of the 0-1s. We've got the Jets at the Tennessee Titans. The Jets, if you watch Monday, they had a hard task right away. Going into San Francisco and having to play them on their own turf. The Jets lost 32-19 to San Fran. They couldn't seem to showcase their offense. The time of possession in this game, San Fran literally had the ball 38 minutes compared to 21 minutes. It's almost a 2-1. Rodgers looked sharp early, but he couldn't get the rhythm, I think, because they just were not out on the field enough. The running game was kind of stagnant. The Jets defense could not make a stop when they needed to. I think you mentioned it before. Aubrey, he was down. They were down on the Jets side all game long. I think maybe they had one punt that game. Then toward the end, Rodgers started to force it. You could tell that Garrett was going to be his go-to guy, and that was kind of their ultimate demise. He ended up getting tip ball going to Garrett, got picked off. I want to say it really was never a close game after halftime. It just seemed like they could not get any momentum going in that first quarter.
Yeah. It looked like it was going to be a competitive game. I think Breece Hall had a good run early on, and then
he had a fumble.
And then he had a fumble, so
Yeah.
you lose a little momentum there. And you asked it before about what was it, the Colts that do you put Flacco in there? You got someone like Aaron Rodgers who's a slinger. He's going to throw the ball, so if you cannot rely on Breece Hall, then you're kind of stuck with throwing the ball, and that's just Aaron Rodgers' game. On this team, are they built for running? Are you going to spend your money on a quarterback, or are you going to spend it on a running back? So I guess we'll have to see which one they prevail with. But if they can't get it together on either side, then they're not going to score enough to beat the Titans here.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see how the New York Jets offensive line goes throughout the year because they have the oldest offensive line in the NFL. But along with one of the oldest quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm not sure. Is Rodgers the oldest one?
He's got to be up there, right?
He's 40.
Tom Brady's retired, so Rodgers is up there. I mean, who else would would contend. Stafford's not old, but he's not young.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins. He's only
Cousins.
like 36. But I digress. Rodgers looked quick. He looked like he had a very quick arm. And he's the master of this. When he gets somebody to jump off sides, he can find his guy. And that's what happened on a Lazard touchdown. He just took advantage of it, and he can find that. Man, is he good at that. So he's got some very good experience that I think he's still bringing to the team. Tyrod Taylor came in halfway through the fourth. He looked pretty damn sharp, too. He ended up throwing one to Lazard for a touchdown late in the game. So even if Rodgers goes down again, I think they got a viable backup. So not to worry last year where they had Zach Wilson. But
yeah, Tyrod is, he could do something, but you got Rodgers. So I think they should try and keep him in for all 4 quarters.
Are you on the Rodgers bandwagon? I would love to see Rodgers just kind of put it in the face of everyone and at least make the playoffs. I don't know about going to the Super Bowl or anything like that, but just to make the playoffs, just so he could say, yeah, I did it again. See, I told you.
I would jump on the Rodgers bandwagon after that happened. I wouldn't be the one that said, I told you all along. I am not Rodgers fan at the moment. I think, the money they paid for him to come over to New York, that was a silly decision. But who's your other option? Zach Wilson. You're kind of stuck.
Could have kept Mike White, maybe.
Yeah. So, I love the discount double check. That's still like classic celebration move. But Rodgers we'll see. We'll see how it goes the rest of the year. At least he made it past 4 plays this season. So
yeah, no kidding. 4 quarters this time, not 4 plays.
Yeah.
So the Jets are in Tennessee, and Tennessee was up 17-0 on Chicago, and it looked like it was going to be a real embarrassing day for the Bears. They ended up losing that game 24-17. So they literally 24 unanswered points by the Chicago Bears. Levis looked decent early on. He looked quick, and he looked like he had some good wheels too. I was actually impressed by his scrambling ability. But he throws a pick 6. He's got a strip sack. There's another pick in there. Plus just overall horrible special teams play. That's what led to the loss. But I think it falls a little bit more squarely on Levis. I don't think he's there yet. And I think it's a very good – I hate to put it this way. I think it's a good – when you look at a guy like Levis who, when he was drafted last year and he fell. Well, I think some NFL scouts probably saw some of this and why he fell. Pollard looked like a bruiser, 16 rushing attempts, 82 yards, 1 touchdown. He averaged over 5 yards per carry. But I put that loss pretty much squarely on Levis. He just kind of gave it away after having a 17-0 lead. Or maybe it's the offensive play calling. Maybe they should have run the ball more.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to give you that. I mentioned earlier Vince Young. I'll tell you that's probably the last time I've even paid attention to the Titans. They had Mariota, they had
Tannehill for a couple years.
Yeah, and Tannehill had some flashes, but he's gone. I can't even tell you about this Titans offense right now. Derrick Henry's gone. Who are the Titans?
Yeah, who are the Titans?
I can't even remember them right now.
All right, well, we got the Jets. The spread is Jets by 4.
I'll go with that.
I'm taking over that.
Okay.
I'm taking Jets by like 10. I think if the Jets, and again, I don't think we got a real good view of what the New York Jets could do. They were only out on the field for 21 minutes against one of the best offenses in the league. So I don't think it's fair to say that we've seen what the Jets can actually do. They played a very hard team. I think they blow up this 4. I wouldn't be surprised if they win by 14.
Yeah, Rodgers is certainly capable of it. So
absolutely, and I think he's going to have a prove-it game. He's going to come out and prove it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say against the Titans, but he's definitely is going to show up. He has the opportunity to do big, to do well.
Oh yeah. All right, away from these 0-1 teams, let's get into a 1-1 matchup. We've got Tampa Bay at Detroit, and this is going to be a fun game. Could be very deceiving, and we'll get into it. But Tampa Bay, as we mentioned before, they won 37-20 over Washington. Mayfield was on point. He was 24 of 30, completing 80% of his passes, 289 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Also had 5 rushes for 21 yards. And Godwin and Evans did exactly what a duo like them is supposed to do. Godwin had 8 receptions, 83 yards, and a touchdown. Evans was 5 for 61 and 2 touchdowns. They are truly one of the most dynamic, if not the most dynamic duo in the NFL for wide receivers. Rashad White still can't find holes. That was the big problem last year with him, right? He had the second most rushing attempts, right behind Christian McCaffrey. Couldn't find holes. Couldn't even get over 1,000 yards last year. So he has 15 rushing attempts for 31 yards. It's 2.1 per average. But he is good out of the backfield, 6 receptions for 75 yards. I think Bucky Irving, who actually had 9 carries for 62 yards, he might end up being Tampa Bay's number 1 eventually, because I'm not sold on Rashad White.
I am not sold on Rashad White. I've had him on my fantasy roster a couple of years, and every time, he'll have a flash of a game, but it's like you said, second most touches and cannot even break 1,000 yards. So I like the kid early on, but right now he's not the running back that Fournette used to be. That some of these other running backs that they had in the past, and I'm always torn between Mike Evans and why am I not even thinking of his name right now?
Chris Godwin.
Chris Godwin. I'm always torn between them. Evans is always the wide receiver 1 for them, but it's like either one of them could go off. So they have an arsenal, and Baker Mayfield has an arm, so some funky stuff could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tampa Bay was solid. Detroit, maybe not as solid, but they did go up against your Rams, who are also a very good team. Detroit last week wins 26-20 in overtime at home against the Rams. Goff was good, 18 of 28. He completed 64% of his passes, 217 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 INT. But I think in Detroit, you've got the Montgomery and Gibbs show. They're going to be tough to stop. It's almost like a thunder and lightning. And I thought the game planning was really smart. It's like they start off with Montgomery. Maybe he gets a little tired after a quarter and a half. They go to Gibbs. And then at the end of the game, they bring Montgomery back, and he's just a bruiser. He literally, I'm sorry, but he ran over the Rams defense at the end of the game.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder.
Sorry about that. Now, that's not to say, and I'm sure you know, Goff almost pissed this game away. He almost threw a game-losing interception, but luckily, the defense for Detroit tightened up a little bit, and it was just one offensive series for Montgomery is all that he needed. But that very well could have went either ways.
Yeah. So I will say it's interesting. First 2 weeks for the Lions, they face off the teams that they eliminated in the playoffs the season before. So this is a good matchup. We're not going to touch the Lions and Rams right now. Still bitter, but this is a good matchup for them. This is the next round in the playoffs for them. So Goff and Baker, 2 quarterbacks that have done great things, but sometimes make bad decisions on the field. But they both have an arsenal. I don't know if you mentioned they've got Amon-Ra, their second receiver over there.
Williams. Jameson Williams, yeah.
Jameson Williams. So you got
and Amon-Ra, he was non-existent.
Just
like Chris Olave. It's like where did some of these big playmaker guys go?
Yeah, but that's the point. There is big playmakers. So Amon-Ra can certainly show up, and he's a workhorse. He's someone that Goff can rely on. As much as it pains me, I got Lions on this just after they did what they did, but to my teams, but I'm gonna go with them.
Yeah, I've got the Lions too, and here's the deceiving part. So it's Lions right now by 7.5, and you might want to put your money out on Tampa Bay, because I don't think that the Lions are going to win by 8 or more over Tampa Bay, especially when Tampa Bay just did what they did last week. If Mayfield comes out with Godwin and Evans and they do the exact same thing, that's going to be a long day for Detroit. Detroit is a get out ahead first, run the ball, stay ahead, but you've got Laporta, you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think this is going to be a little bit closer than the whopping 7.5 that they're giving Detroit. But I could be wrong. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I still like Detroit like you do. I still like them in this game. They're playing at home. I think they're just a better team, but
yeah, no, you give them to the home team at that point.
All right, here's one that I'm going to love. Both teams are 0-1, unfortunately. We'll do my pain right before your pain. How about that?
Yeah, let's have it.
Las Vegas at Baltimore. And I think it's a funny thing when I go on X and Las Vegas is talking about, this is going to be our bounce back week. And I'm thinking, you're going into Baltimore, dude. This is not a bounce back week for you. I'm sorry. especially after only putting up 10 points. So Las Vegas lost 10-22 to the Chargers. But, they did look good at first. They came out fighting. They were up at one point, 7-3. Both teams really started off quite sluggish after the first quarter. And then it was even only 9-7 to start the fourth quarter. So it looked like it was going to be a defensive struggle or a defensive battle there. And you got Gardner Minshew, who a lot of people, I already saw something, how long before you pull Gardner Minshew? He's got to be on the hot seat. He wasn't bad. He was not that bad. 25 of 33. He completed 75% of his passes. 257 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He did better than probably most of the other quarterbacks did in week 1. Las Vegas missed a field goal. They couldn't finish. Their running game was stagnant. And their D just broke. Their defense broke in the fourth quarter, and that's the only reason why they lost. Madison seemed to be very versatile coming out of the backfield. But in the end, turnovers killed Las Vegas. I think they were a -3 in that game.
Yeah, turnovers, will always hurt you. That doesn't even need to be said. I'm a big fan of Minshew. I love the Minshew mania. When he was down in Jacksonville. Does he have it in Las Vegas? He's got a good wide receiver core, but can he make the throw to them? That's the question.
Yeah, and Brock Bowers hadn't played for most of the preseason. He wasn't practicing. That's their number 1 pick. That's a big target, and I think he was their leading receiver. He had something along the lines of 6 receptions, 60 yards. But Devontae Adams, you got to try to get the ball to him a little bit more. Minshew has proven in the past that he can put up points. So I think this is just kind of a rusty, hey, we've got some new people, and not everybody was raring to go, maybe. On the other side, you got Baltimore. Like I said before, Lamar looks like an MVP. And if you saw that game, he was 26 of 41, 273 passing yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. He also had 16 carries for 122 yards. So let me just say that again, 122 rushing yards, 273 passing yards. This was one of the most prolific offenses that we saw all weekend. He averaged 7.6 yards per carry. Here's the thing, and I'm going to beat it, and you can call me a conspiracy theorist. You can call me I'm crazy. The amount of penalties that happened early, against the Ravens, and I'll throw this out at you, illegal formation. The Ravens had 5. The rest of the league had 17. All 31 other teams. And then there was a very questionable holding penalty on Linderbaum that negated a gigantic play that Lamar had. I'm not putting all the blame on the refs. I'm just saying when it comes to Kansas City, which is who they played, they seem to get a little bit more favoritism. And if I could give one word of advice to the offensive coordinator for the Ravens, Monken, dude, spread out your offense when you're going to run Travis Henry. Like, I get that he's a beast. But when you've got 10 defenders in the box because it's an obvious run play, stop. Spread that offense out and let the guy have a little bit of room to get started.
Yeah. I will say as a fan of the team, tend to always have biases. I will give it to you that it does seem a little odd that the Chiefs always, season opener have games like this. This is always how their season openers go. Mahomes doesn't really do much. He wasn't even stand out during the game. And you mentioned Lamar had 1 touchdown. If you ask him, he had 2 at the end of the game there. But that was close. I remember watching that, thinking it was a touchdown. The game is over. I looked away, got carried away in conversation, and then looked back and the game was over. However, the game was over and the Chiefs had won. I was like, what the hell just happened? So, that's a tough one. But Lamar, like you said, MVP caliber. He lost weight. He's in better shape than he was, I guess, if that's your metric, than the year prior. So I think, makes him lighter on his feet. Can his defensive line protect him? When he's, barreling through, he needs to definitely take some slides and protect himself. But I'm calling an MVP season for Lamar here.
Yeah, and I don't mean, when I say MVP too, I don't mean that he's the best quarterback in the league, because we could have a whole debate about that. I've got maybe 3 other people that I would put above him. I just mean, if you take Lamar out of that team, and especially during that game, if you take him out and put any other quarterback there, they're not even close. The Baltimore's not even in the game. What he can do as most valuable player of that offense and of that team is win football games. So, just to clarify. So in this game, you got Baltimore by 8.5. I think we're both going to go Baltimore in this one over Las Vegas.
Absolutely.
I think this could be the biggest spread, biggest win differential of the weekend. Baltimore has already picked a win by 8.5. Wouldn't surprise me if they went out and won by 17 just because they're pissed. You know what I mean? But I think that's a kind of a slam dunk. It might be the biggest spread of the weekend is Baltimore by 8.5.
Yeah, I won't even say you're talking like a fan there. I would agree that I was a little disappointed with how close that game was last week for them.
Yeah. All right, now we're on to your pain. We've got the Los Angeles Rams at the Arizona Cardinals. The Rams lost 20-26 in overtime to the Detroit Lions in Detroit. From what I saw, the Rams came out. They looked pass heavy, and now they don't have Puka. How is that going to affect the offense? But Stafford, he did have a bad interception at the end zone. That hurt. Couldn't get 3, couldn't get 7 out of that. Otherwise, he was really good. He was really good. 34-49. Completed 69% of his passes, 317 yards, had a touchdown. Kyron Williams, though, boy, somebody's got to kick him in the butt. 18 rushing attempts for 50 yards, 2.8 on average. He did have a touchdown, though. Kupp was phenomenal. Kupp was absolutely phenomenal. I'm not saying it just because you're a Rams fan. He had 14 receptions, 110 yards, and a touchdown, and he's got some ridiculous skill. This guy is back. I know he was hurt last year, but this guy, I mean, the tippy toe catches, the fingertip catches, down the sideline. I mean, everything that this guy did, it was like, holy how does he do this? He was really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Kupp has that, that football, mindset. He's got the athleticism, intelligence. So that's what I was trying to get, is football intelligence, to know where you are on the sideline, where you need to drag your feet at, where you need to be to make the reception and get some extra yards after catch. It is disappointing that Puka is out for 3 to 4 weeks. So that will impact the offense. But when you have someone like Kupp, may not impact it that much against the Cardinals. Am I worried? No, but it's something that you build up your arsenal there with multiple receivers. Without him, you certainly will feel it. But Kyron's capable of getting downfield, making some big plays. So, and then Stafford is a Super Bowl champ. So I'm not too worried about this one. I'm excited for that. And so, for the record, for those who are not following along Fantasy Turf War but want to, look out for me. My team name is Cup of Almond Ramen Noodles. So, it's a little homage to my team there.
And I thought the funniest thing about that, I'm like, oh, he must have both of those guys. And you actually have neither one of those guys.
Yeah. They were on my radar. Amon-Ra. So actually, I was anticipating Amon-Ra. I was 8th pick in our draft.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 8th pick in our draft. So I was anticipating having the opportunity for him. He ended up going 7th in our round. But surprisingly, Bijan Robinson slid to 8th pick. So I could not pass up on that and took that. Disappointing this past week, but that's who I ended up with. And,
I've got Bijan too, and I had to take him in the 5th. I wasn't going to pass him up with the 5th pick. Yeah, it was a little disappointing. He was a little below average, but I was just happy to see that he wasn't splitting carries with Tyler Algier.
Yes.
I think Algier had maybe 3 or 4 carries at most, not a whole lot. So I was happy to see that.
Yeah, we'll talk about them later, but for sure that was good to see.
Here's one more thing that I will give to the Rams. Out of all the teams that I saw this year, give your offensive line coach, give that guy a raise. Because I got to tell you, the fundamentals, and whether it's Sean McVay or whoever, the fundamentals on that offensive line were fantastic. It was like it was scripted to perfection. Like when you're going to Vegas and you're seeing the line dancing girls, right? I mean, they just they crushed it. The fundamentals on that offensive line to open holes and to get to that second tier of defender, that was really impressive. Really impressive.
Yeah, it's exciting to see when they operate as a team. And
Yeah.
McVay's offense, they're an offensive team, so that's good to see.
For sure. Moving over to Arizona, Kyler Murray, 4 of 5 of his top receivers last weekend were halfbacks and tight ends. Dude did not get the memo that Marvin Harrison Jr. was on his team. For real. Harrison Jr. had 1 reception for 4 yards. What are you doing with this guy? All of his passes, Kyler Murray, all of his passes were very short passes. Connor was poor. James Conner, 16 rushing attempts, 50 yards, 3.1 yards per carry. The defense could not contain Josh Allen. We kind of talked about him and his MVP-esque performance last week. After an early strip sack, Josh Allen came back. He played very well. And the only reason why Arizona was in that game was because their special teams had a 96-yard kick return late that kept it close in that 28-34 loss. My biggest takeaway from this Arizona team is that Kyler Murray looks hilarious when he runs the ball. He is just, I don't know what the guidelines are for being a little person, but that dude running the ball, it looked so damn funny. But I'm going to say the same thing about him, like I said about Bryce Young. He's not going to make it. I'm just not a fan of Kyler Murray. You can give him all the fantasy, fantasy-wise, sure. Maybe he's a 7, 8, 9, something like that in there. I wouldn't draft him. I wouldn't at all. And you get the guy some weapons, and he's not even going to him. Like I said, 4 out of his 5 top receivers, 2 of them were halfbacks and 2 of them were tight ends. What are we doing?
Yeah, it makes you question what's going on at practice. Are they designing this intentionally because they're, afraid of the ball flying too far and it ended up in the defender's hands? Kyler Murray's an enigma to me. I remember he had, an excellent rookie or just a surprising, impressive rookie in sophomore season. And then he has an arm on him and he's a little guy who can run. And maybe that's what it was, is they weren't sure that he was going to take off and run. So that kind of left it open for him to do that. And early on he took advantage, but now that they know that he's capable of it, it's kind of like they could shut him down. So, when your number 1 running back's not doing anything, your quarterback is running more than your running back, what's going on this team?
Yeah, and I tell you what, looking at James Conner, his stats from last year, that was a breakout year for him. After being in the league for 6 years, he had finally one outstanding year last year, but the guy's like 29 years old as well. And, I got to say, when your first 6 years in the league are marred with injury and you're just not doing that much, I'm not sure how he pulled off the numbers that he did last year outside of the fact that Kyler Murray was hurt and they just thought, we're going to have to hand this guy the ball all the time. Had a great year. I wasn't going after the hype on James Conner this year. And he kind of showed up in the way that he usually does outside of last year.
Yeah, that was probably a smart decision.
So I think we're both on the same page here. I don't have to ask you. I got the Rams in this one easily. Arizona, though, 1.5-point favorites.
That's insulting, but
that is very insulting.
Yeah.
I'm going, and I even wrote it down. I wrote it down right underneath my LA Rams here. All day easy money. Go on the Rams. You gotta. That's just too sick.
Take it. When Vegas is giving it to you, take it.
All day long. All right, next game up. Bengals and KC, and I'm really hoping for a good game here. Obviously, I'm really hoping. Cincinnati, we already mentioned them, losing to New England last week, 16-10. They didn't show up at all. Just bad. I don't know what else to say. They didn't score until there was only 1 minute left in the third quarter. I don't even know how you do that with the weapons that you've got on your team. They did not control the trenches. The offensive line was constantly beat. It was poor play calling by the offensive coordinator. I don't know what kind of plays he was putting out there, if there was miscommunication or what, but there was nothing that was clicking. Defensively, they had 1 sack. They had no turnovers. Burrow was 21-29 for only 164 yards, very un-Burrow-esque. But you've got all these weapons, and I get it. Maybe you didn't have the 3-headed monster like you did last year. But holy crap, really? To one of the preseason worst teams in the league, the New England Patriots. You're going to drop a 10 spot and that's it?
Yeah, that was a surprise. It makes you wonder what's going on for sure. But Burrow had a very disappointing season last year and a very disappointing start this season. Is this the true nature of how this team is going to go with Burrows behind the snap? Makes you wonder.
Yeah. Do you believe any of the hype? He was seen on the sideline, and maybe it's just, him kind of working through things, but his wrist that he had surgery on, they're saying, oh, he might have re-injured it or this, that. And Burrow came out earlier today, said, no, I'm always kind of working on it. I'm always kind of, I got to keep it warm. I got to keep it loose. And how much of a factor do you think that is?
I did see I did see social media popping off about that. I try not to play into stuff like that. I'm sure you played sports as a kid growing up. Even if you injure something and you're still coming off an injury, maybe not necessary surgery of this caliber, but you still kind of it's in the back of your mind. You think about it. Is it plaguing you to the point where you can't play? If the coaches cleared you, and we've heard all sorts of horror stories where these guys are on pain meds to get through some serious pain, and you have no idea until 10 years after they retire and you hear their story. But I try to pay no mind to it, and I think he'll be fine as far as that goes. But again, just kind of makes you wonder what's going on.
Right. Kansas City, obviously they won 27-20. We just covered that versus Baltimore. If they're playing in Kansas City's going to win, and that's just kind of what the NFL wants, I think, at this point. Right tackle Juwan Taylor for Kansas City, I got to tell you, was false starting all game long, and nobody wants to see it. He got called twice. Yep, I get it. But he probably did it about 15 times. Good for him. That's me being bitter. Sorry, everyone.
No, I didn't sound like that at all.
No. KC got beaten every aspect of the game last week, but they still won. How often can they actually do that? And I mean every aspect, like third down conversion, passing yards, rushing yards, just everything. I'm hoping that I'm wrong in this one. I'm really hoping that I'm wrong. I'm picking Kansas City because it's in Kansas City. I really want Cincy to play well and beat this team. Travis Kelce was almost a non-factor. He's 35 years old now. He started to look a little slow. Maybe it's just me. Maybe that's my hopes. I don't know. Wasn't much of a factor, but now you've got two speedy guys in Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy that are going to tear it up.
Yeah, Xavier Worthy was, that was a surprise for me. I'm waiting for, Hollywood Brown to come, back eligible to play. But you said, beaten on every facet of the game and still pulls out a win. Kansas City wins games. So, it kind of tells you Andy Reid can figure it out. Mahomes can figure it out. He pulls out some miracles sometimes. So did that happen to your Baltimore Ravens last week? It's kind of crazy, but these guys still can win. I'm going with Kansas City, but I'd agree with you. I'd like to see Joe Burrows and the Bengals still become relevant again.
Yeah.
Because then it makes the Rams Super Bowl championship a few years ago make more sense.
Yeah, it does.
Makes it a little more exciting.
Kansas City by 5.5.
I say that's low, but after I say I hope Bengals can do something, but I say that's low.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, on to the next. We've got the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Denver Broncos. Pittsburgh won last week, 18-10 over Atlanta in basically what was a kick fest. They had all field goals in that game, no touchdowns. T.J. Watt took the game over, more so than Justin Fields did. Not that Justin Fields was horrible. He was 17-23, 156 passing yards. No touchdowns, no interceptions. He didn't lose the game by any means. He was a pretty good actual manager of the offense. Also had 14 rushes for 57, but no end zone. And I think that was the main thing about Justin Fields and why they got rid of him. He can't find the end zone. Well, he just proved everybody right there. You get into field goal range, and great, you got 6 of them. The running game was actually bad, and I wasn't expecting that. Harris had 20 rushing attempts for 70 yards, which was 3.5 yards per. And we didn't even see Jalen Warren. I think he had maybe 2 carries. And I think it's pretty predictable at this point that Pittsburgh Pickens is their only guy. I don't know if they were really, really, really hoping for that Ayuk trade to go through. It looks like they are, because Pickens is the only wide receiver that they've got on that team, and they made that very evident in last week's game.
Yeah, I mean, all I could say is win Russell Wilson because they need him on the field there. I picked Pickens knowing that I've had Najee Harris on my roster a few times, and I know that is always a disappointment for a fantasy manager. So I picked George Pickens specifically for that. It's just, again, win Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and it's too bad that we're not going to get that this weekend, aren't we? I mean, this is the game that you really wanted to see Russell Wilson in there against Denver.
Yeah. Yeah. Is he actually? So he is out. He's not playing?
He's not playing. They're still suiting up Justin Fields.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's really disappointing for that game.
Denver,
on the other hand, they lost to Seattle 26-20. I had higher hopes for Nix. I thought he was going to be good. He was not sharp at all. The Denver D did all that they could, including two safeties. Are you kidding me? But for real, like, when was the last time you heard of an offense get two safeties in a game?
You rarely hear
defense.
One of them.
Denver's offensive line could not sustain any drives. They had too many third and long. They had zero run support by McLaughlin, who had 10 rushing attempts for 27 yards. That's 2.7 per carry. Williams wasn't much better, 8 carries for 13 yards, 2.9 per carry, and he had a fumble. The offense just looked sloppy.
Yeah, it wasn't impressive at all. Bo Nix, rookie season, first game. Can he shake it off? He had a pretty impressive college career. This is a big jump for him. So, to get shut down like he did and make it look kind of, minor league, it was embarrassing. So, I got Steelers on this, even though Russell Wilson won't be the one to get them that win, but I got Steelers.
You got Steelers. I got Broncos. Steelers are picked to win 2.5.
Yeah.
But I'm still going to give the nod to Denver. And to your point, Bo Nix looked really good. He's a guy that can complete, and did in the preseason as well. He completes 70% of his passes. So what happened in this game, I have no freaking idea. Was it just that? Was it just, I don't know. I couldn't pinpoint one thing. He just looked off. First game jitters, maybe? I'm not sure, but he looked damn good in the preseason. He looked good last year in college, completing 70+% of his passes. I think 77 is what he left off with. So it was really amazing. I'm looking for him to be a bounce back player this week. Bo Nix.
Yeah, and I'm not against that. Sometimes you got to pick up some upsets, and especially ones that seem like shouldn't be upsets. You got to run with it. So I'm not. It could happen.
All right, this is one of my favorite games of the week: Chicago and Houston. Sunday Night Football. Love it. Chicago is 0-1. We kind of discussed how Tennessee let them back in the game last week for that win, and Houston went into Indianapolis and won. Caleb Williams. Anybody that has watched anything that I've ever said knows that I am not a fan of Caleb Williams at all. And he was not good. Watching him, he underthrew his receivers. He overthrew his receivers. He loses a ton of yards on sacks. He was 14 of 29, which is 48% completion for 93 yards. Under 100 yards passing. For all of these weapons that they supposedly have that are supposed to be so great, you went out and you got Keenan Allen. You got DJ Moore. You went and drafted Odunze. Your tight end isn't bad. Like, what happened? 93 yards. I put that completely on Caleb Williams' shoulder. He looked nervous. Looking at him, it was kind of the same thing that I saw, like, emotionally from Deshaun Watson, looking like he just didn't want to be there. It looked like Caleb Williams could not have felt more uncomfortable in that offensive scheme. For all the weapons that they have, couldn't get much going for him. I give 15 points to the defense for Chicago. Not much of the offense to get him back in that game because they did have a blocked punt. They had a pick six. They had 2 interceptions, a strip sack. DeAndre Swift looked okay. 10 attempts, 30 yards. DJ Moore, 5 catches for 36. Keenan Allen was 4 for 29. A lot of dinky-dunky pass completion stuff. Nothing that really drew my attention.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned, you said he looked uncomfortable there. We just talked about Bo Nix, and he had seemingly rookie jitters, but someone who's just uncomfortable and not feeling like they want to be there, their very first game in the NFL, kind of makes you wonder what's going on in their head. But I am firmly against teams franchising a rookie quarterback and, going high on them very early on in the draft. It's never seems to make sense. It hasn't made sense in a long time. I mean, who's the last franchise quarterback that's actually made sense? Mahomes?
So far, yeah.
Yeah. You got Lamar, but he has no Super Bowls yet. Sorry to
Fair.
rub that in your face, but
No, that's fair. That's completely fair.
yeah. So it's brutal. It's to see these guys. Uh, you know, this game is going to be probably one-sided.
Yeah, I think so too. Houston, Stroud, like I mentioned before, he seemed methodical. He spends as much time as he possibly can. He seems to have great pocket awareness, and he checks down as much as possible before he ends up taking off. He completed 24 of 32 of his passes for 75%, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He was clean. He was very good. As surprisingly good as he was last year as a rookie, he's coming off this game here looking just as good. Mixon, how about this? Mixon still looks like he's got some tread left on those tires. 30 carries, 159 yards, 5.3 yards per carry for this guy that Cincinnati didn't want to keep. He had a touchdown. He also had 3 receptions for 19 yards. And of course, they've got Diggs and they got Nico Collins. Diggs looks like he's going to be the guy that they're going to go to down in the end zone. He had 6 receptions, 33 yards, a lot of short plays, a lot of conversion type passes, but he also had 2 touchdowns. So again, I think he's going to be the go-to hands guy on short field. And then you got Nico Collins, who is unbelievably skilled in this game. 6 receptions also, but for 117 yards. I think Houston is a top 7, top 8 team for sure. And if they can host Chicago this upcoming Sunday and just blow them out of the water, I don't think there's any doubt they're a top 5 team.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Stroud, him and Love last year, I think those are the 2 quarterbacks that kind of impressed everyone being so young. And he is methodical. He has a lot of receivers. Already mentioned, Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell. They've got, and then Mixon. Yeah, he fits in very well with this roster. So I think this is a very one-sided game. I'll double down on that.
Yeah, Houston's going to be scary. They've got a 6.5 spread. I'm definitely going Houston on this one.
Absolutely. Lock it in.
All right. And Monday Night Football, Atlanta at Philly. Atlanta was very lackluster against Pittsburgh last weekend, 18-10. The O-line looked rough. The Pittsburgh D was not giving Cousins really any time to throw the ball. Cousins was 16-26, 155 yards. He was only able to complete about 61.5% of his passes. And this is a guy that usually is up there in the high 70s for pass completion. He had 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, so not a good day. And you almost got to wonder, is it the injury or is it not the injury? Was it just the fact that TJ Watt is, in my eyes, defensive player of the year from last year? He's one of the scariest guys on the defense for any team, if not the scariest. We mentioned Bijan before. He was mediocre, 18 for 68, only 3.8 yards per carry. They need to feed this guy. They need to give him the ball more. Otherwise, it was the same old Drake London. I had Drake London on my fantasy team last year. I played him maybe twice. He had maybe 3 or 4 good games. He had 2 receptions for 15 yards, and Kyle Pitts only had 3 receptions for 26. The defense was okay. They didn't allow a touchdown, obviously, but, man, 2 sacks. They only got 2 sacks, no turnovers.
Yeah, lackluster. Like you said, you got to get the ball in Bijan's hands. You got to get him comfortable. You got to get him getting yards downfield. That will allow Kirk Cousins to get a little more comfortable himself. He's always had Dalvin Cook to rely on. He's had good running backs. When those guys go off, that allows you to find your receivers. So Kirk Cousins certainly needs that. I am past Kirk Cousins. I did like that early on when he was in Minnesota, but for now, I think Minnesota kind of made a good decision, part ways with him. Atlanta spending a lot of money on him was not a good decision. So Minnesota won on that transaction. But again, it's Kirk Cousins. He can make big plays. He can do a good job. He is a veteran, but they have to get their running game going so that he can be comfortable to get in the pocket and find some guys downfield.
Absolutely. And then the Philadelphia Eagles, the other team that was down in Brazil this last weekend, they beat Green Bay 34-29. Despite Jalen Hurts looking what I thought was one of the worst quarterback plays of the weekend, 20 of 34, he had 278 yards. Doesn't sound bad yet, but he had 2 fumbles. 1 was lost. He had 2 interceptions, but really should have had 4. Green Bay defenders, if they could learn how to catch, they would have had 4 interceptions against Jalen Hurts. He was just off target. This offense cooked, though. Saquon, and how about Saquon? When I was watching that game, you know how you look at a guy and you're like, oh man, that looks so weird. He's wearing a different jersey. Saquon looked like he should have been in a Philadelphia Eagles jersey like his entire career. He just looked good wearing that jersey. 24 carries, 109 yards. He was awesome. 4.5 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns by himself, which is more than what the Giants' whole team has so far this year. AJ Brown looked fast. He was speeding away from people. 5 receptions, 119 yards and a touchdown. And Devonta Smith was tough, strong. He's like this, short route, medium route, and he was running people over. 7 receptions for 84 yards. The defense had 2 sacks, 1 interception. Inside linebacker Zach Bond who looked amazing. He had both of those sacks. And I mentioned it before. He came over from the New Orleans Saints where he spent 4 years. He's already got in one game what he did for a half a season in New Orleans there. So they've got some really unique, really good pieces there in Philadelphia.
Absolutely. You said it, it kind of looks like Saquon belongs in an Eagles jersey. He's always belonged in an Eagles jersey. He played college football in Pennsylvania. Now he's playing the NFL in Pennsylvania. Maybe that makes sense. But I am just dumbfounded and bitter that I passed on Saquon in 2 of my leagues when it came up, and I regret it. I didn't think about it in the roster that he's in. When you have someone like Jalen Hurts who can run the ball, can do the tush push, and then you have Saquon also, that kind of makes that you have two people there that can do it. So it gives Saquon some freedom and flexibility to break out and do something like that. Devonta Smith, stud player. AJ Brown, stud player. I will say one of those fumbles was not Jalen Hurts' fault. He had a little miscue with his center, but I guess as a leader, do you talk about that early on so that you avoid that in the game? Can that have been avoided? Possibly. And just the turf in Brazil, you and I weren't there, so we can't really attest to whether it had an impact, but certainly you saw a lot of slipping on the field early on, and those that figured out how to, pivot and figure it out, those are the players that were making the big plays, and Jalen wasn't one of them.
Yeah, and the players were saying the same thing, and you could kind of tell anytime, somebody was trying to make, a 180 that they were falling on their butts or they lost their traction. Even on the last play of the game, Malik Willis, who came in for Love, he couldn't even roll out without slipping. So, yeah. And a lot of the players thought that, this was not the right turf. We should never play here again. So,
yeah, it's as far as the safety and playability for the players, that's certainly something to consider. But as a competitor, face to face with another team, when the other players are figuring it out and you're not, is it a you problem or is it a them problem? Is it the field? Someone else figured it out, right? You're both playing under the same conditions.
Yeah, right. That's true. This one's a no-brainer for me. They're playing in Philly. Philly looked better last week than this week. I'm definitely going with the Eagles.
I've got those birds for sure.
Yep. 6.5 is a spread on that one. I'm not sure which way to go on that, to be honest with you. I think that's a pretty fair number.
Yeah, they Falcons could keep it close, but I would say Eagles can be dynamic. So,
absolutely. Well, hey, man, guess what? That's it for us. We've covered all the games, and we've got the Thursday night game is about 15 minutes in right now. So we got to get the hell out of here and start watching the Buffalo-Miami game.
Yeah, I appreciate you, postponing this an hour. We were supposed to do an hour earlier so that we could catch the game and catch the start of it. Hitting right at 90 minutes here. So this was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on. And I can't even remember who I picked, but I think I got the Miami Dolphins on this. So let's see if I'm right. Who's right on that? So
there you go. All right, man. Well, you have a good night. Have good luck this weekend. I hope you get the dub. And we'll be talking to you again soon. And we will probably be seeing Nick and his cousin, Ryan Gilly, on the show, hopefully sometime together. I was trying to make that work as well, but he couldn't get off work in time. So we'll see if we can make that happen a different time.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate it, bro.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And we'll be chatting again shortly.